Much like Tywin Lannister from our previous video, Stannis Baratheon has an impressively large following, most of whom are fans of the books over the show. But unlike the previously mentioned candidate, Stannis actually has a claim to the throne. Even still, that's not the primary reason his fans even want him on the throne. No, there are quite a few reasons, but I can summarize his supporters' notions in 4 broad points, starting with the first. As previously stated, he is arguably the most by-the-book hereditary right to the throne. For those unfamiliar with the franchise, his older brother Robert Baratheon was the king of Westeros at the beginning of the A Song of Ice and Fire novels and the Game of Thrones TV series. Robert and his wife Cersei had 3 children, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen. While Joffrey was next in line for the throne, as Robert's eldest, it was discovered that the 3 were in fact bastard children from Cersei's infidelity, making them ineligible to the throne. As the next eldest son after Robert, Stannis, by law, is the heir to the throne. However, Stannis' younger brother Renly also proclaimed himself king, with support from the powerful House Tyrell, who provide most of the food for the realm, along with thousands of soldiers. Joffrey also refused to give up the throne to his not technically Uncle Stannis, and was backed by arguably the most powerful family in Westeros, House Lannister, also being the wealthiest house out of all the kingdoms and sporting a near equally powerful army. On top of this, Balon Greyjoy of the Iron Isles, with the strongest navy in the realm and a history of piracy, and Robb Stark of the North, the geographically largest and harshest realm in Westeros, both rebelled against the crown, proclaiming themselves kings and the nation's sovereign, thus beginning the War of 5 Kings. 5 kings or not, Stannis Baratheon has an abundance of military experience to beat all of them 3 different ways and back. Even Tywin Lannister, one of the most brilliant political and military minds of the series, recognized Stannis as the biggest threat out of all of them, saying, "This is Stannis Baratheon. The man will fight to the bitter end and then some. If he is gone, it can only mean he intends to resume the war." For his first military feat, let's back up to before the start of the series. During Robert's rebellion, Houses Baratheon, Aeron, Tully, and Stark all rebelled against King Aerys Targaryen, aka the Mad King, with the Baratheons at the head. While the older brother Robert achieved one victory after another, one single defeat finally fell upon him. The combatants who dealt this blow to Robert, House Tyrell, then marched on the Baratheon home, the Stormlands, and besieging their primary castle, Storm's End. Stannis was then tasked with cleaning up Robert's mess. In other words, he had to hold out the siege of Storm's End at all costs. Stannis held out for an entire year, until the war ended. With next to no supplies and few troops, Stannis made it possible, though he was not given any recognition for it. Afterward, Stannis was tasked with capturing the island stronghold of Dragonstone, the last holdout of the Targaryens. The castle had never been taken before by force, and Stannis had no fleet with which to sail there, so he built a new one from scratch. The assault on Dragonstone was successful, and Robert cemented his rule on the throne. No thanks to his brother Stannis. However, 6 years after Robert was crowned, the Greyjoys rebelled. Yes, Balon Greyjoy has rebelled against the Iron Throne twice now, with this incident being the first. As previously stated, the Greyjoys have one of, if not the most powerful navies in Westeros. After they sunk arguably the next strongest fleet, the Lannisters' navy, they went almost unchallenged in the Sunset Seas, until Stannis brought his new royal fleet to bear. He laid a trap for them off the coast of Fair Isle, and in one decisive battle he conquered the Greyjoy fleet, capturing or sinking all their vessels and killing most of the Greyjoy family members in the process. With the seas now uncontested, the nobles of Westeros were then able to land on each of the Iron Isles and subdue them. Stannis Baratheon captured the largest of the isles, Great Wick. The significance of this battle is that he actually led his soldiers from the front. See, in the books, Stannis has no taste for combat, and leads from the back, whereas in the show he's first up the ladder and first to draw blood. He's no coward, mind you, he's a tactician. He plans the battle with precision and executes it with efficiency, only leading his troops up front when needed. His crowning achievement came when he defeated an army of wildlings beyond the wall. The opposing army outnumbered Stannis' 1,000 to 1, and even had giants and mammoths. The wildling army did not, however, have cavalry, so Stannis used his mobile advantage to surprise, outmaneuver, and encircle his enemy, eventually killing or capturing tens of thousands, whom he eventually let go once they bent the knee to him. Currently in the books, Stannis is actually winning the war in the north and gaining the support of many of the noble houses, whereas in the show, he is desperate and losing to the Boltons. Supporters point out that few living beings in Westeros have as impressive a military resume as does Stannis. Perhaps his most defining trait of all, no one is above the law in Stannis Baratheon's eyes, not even the king or his nobles. In the book A Storm of Swords, it was revealed that he even castrated any of his own soldiers that commit rape. Stannis follows the letter of the law and equally gives out reward for loyalty and punishment for crime. The best example of this is with one of his closest knights, Sir Davos Seaworth. To summarize, Davos used to be a low-born smuggler, but during Robert's Rebellion, Davos took sympathy on Stannis' starving garrison at Storm's End. He managed to smuggle in rations of food past the besiegers, and, let's just hear the story in his words.
Then, Stannis Baratheon arrived. The siege had left him gaunt, but not weak, never weak. He greeted me and accepted my onions with cool courtesy, betraying no emotion, even as all wept. He doled out the food to his wife and each of his men before he ate himself, a portion no larger than any other. When he finally thanked me, I could see his mind had already returned to the castle's defense. His duty. After Ares fell and Lord Stark lifted the siege, Stannis summoned me. For my salvation at Storm's End, I was to be granted a knighthood, a keep of my own, and my son taken into Stannis' personal service. Davos of Flea Bottom had become Sir Davos of House Seaworth, and his son would serve the king's own brother. But for my previous crimes as a smuggler, I was to have the fingertips of one hand taken off above the highest joint. Stannis held that I had flouted the laws of the land for years, and a good act does not wash out the bad. In one fell swoop, or 5, Stannis gave my son a future and my family a name that I could never have imagined, nor earned on my own. For during my many years as a smuggler, I visited many ports, taverns and back alleys, and saw many things in this world, but never justice. Until Stannis.
That virtually sums it up. Stannis also never wanted to be king, but he knew that a king had to rule, and rule justly, lest the whole realm suffer. He was not in love with his unattractive wife, there I said it, yet he still remained faithful to her, did not seek an annulment to his marriage, and performed his duty as a husband to produce an heir for his noble house, Shireen, whom he loved dearly. The hardest decision he's honestly ever had to face was during Robert's Rebellion. Follow his king, or follow his brother, as was the duty for any younger brother. He chose his brother over the king, which leads me to my final point. Stannis lacks a lot of emotion. The extra unfair life he's lived ensured that, but there's only one duty that he cares to follow above all others, his duty to the realm. Why did Stannis follow his brother instead of the king? Because if King Aerys ruled, the realm would suffer. His brother and he, on the other hand, could place a better king on the throne. When letters were sent out from the Wall warning Westeros that the White Walkers were returning and that the undead would soon be a threat, only Stannis answered the letter. He went to the Wall, confirmed the reports, and allowed several miners to collect obsidian from Dragonstone, obsidian being called dragonglass, which was abundant on the island, and was a weakness to the White Walkers. But Stannis is not perfect, by any means. He's a great military commander, yes, but doesn't play the political games that the rest of the Westerosi nobility does. As such, he has no friends in court and few allies. The majority of the Stormlands vouched for his younger brother Renly as king because Renly knew how to negotiate and be the diplomat. When Robert Baratheon captured a number of lords from the Stormlands back during Robert's Rebellion, Stannis wanted to have them executed. Robert instead feasted and drank with these prisoners as if they were not just guests, but friends, all against Stannis' advising. And much to Stannis' surprise, these men who had tried to kill Robert just days before were now drinking and feasting and even toasting to Robert's name, proclaiming him king. Robert turns enemies into friends if he can. Stannis expects them to bend the knee honorably and swear loyalty, as is their duty, then prepares to take up the sword when they don't. He does always give his enemies the chance to bend the knee to him before battle, whether he has the advantage or not. When he and Renly parleyed the day before their battle, Stannis gave him multiple chances, but Renly refused, having numerical superiority. Which brings me to my next point. When pushed against the wall, Stannis will use any means to win against those who show no honor. Against his own younger brother, he allowed his Red Priestess, Melisandre, to summon a shadow demon and assassinate Renly that same night. It was never expressed in the show, but he lamented Renly's death for the rest of his life. He allowed this same type of assassination again when the Keeper of Storm's End refused to surrender the castle. Melisandre, a Red Priestess of R'hllor, practiced sacrifice through burnt offerings, even human sacrifice. In the books, Stannis denied her to do this practice, but every now and then Melisandre would get away with it, largely in secret. In the show, Stannis seemed to let Melisandre burn just about anyone she wanted. But both in the books and in the show, Stannis almost allowed Melisandre to sacrifice Robert's bastard son to win the war. In the books, he expresses that he didn't want to take the young man's life, so Stannis made Melisandre use leeches on the boy to test if sacrificing royal blood really worked as the Red Priestess claimed, instead of outright killing him. He called out the names of all 3 of the remaining usurpers, Robb Stark, Balon Greyjoy, and Joffrey Baratheon, and then threw the leeches in the fire. Shortly afterward, all 3 died. After that, he said he likely would let Melisandre sacrifice the boy. Davos Seaworthy had to be the one to smuggle Robert's bastard child out of Dragonstone to prevent him from being sacrificed. The tipping point that made the majority of TV-only fans completely abandon Stannis was when he allowed his own daughter Shireen to be burned alive, sacrificed to R'hllor, in the hopes that he'd win the war. I have only ever found one TV-only fan try to justify this, stating that Stannis had to either choose between one life or hundreds of thousands, and that in his mind, Shireen's life would have given him victory. I am going to pull this rule of thumb on screen instead.
You burned a little girl alive!
I only do what my lord commands.
If he commands you to burn children, your lord is evil.
As I said before, the majority of Stannis Baratheon's fans are fans of the books over the show. In the books, Stannis doesn't sacrifice Shireen. In fact, he does virtually the opposite. At the end of the latest book, A Dance of Dragons, Stannis is actually winning the fight in the north against the Boltons, and many noble houses have joined him. Just before going to besiege the northern capital of Winterfell, Stannis tells his men that if he falls in battle, they must do everything in their power to ensure that Shireen is placed on the throne in his stead. Doesn't sound like someone who'd turn around and burn their own daughter, does it? Especially going off of book Stannis, who doesn't freely allow Melisandre to perform any human sacrifice she wants. But George R.R. Martin has confirmed that in one of the next 2 remaining books, Shireen will be burned alive. He just never specified who would do it. There's a lot more detail I could give on each of these points about Stannis. But the long and short of it is, he's a commander, an experienced, gifted strategist, a man of his word, and a man without emotion, and lacking any political skill. He doesn't tolerate any corruption or lawlessness in his court, and to him, no one is above the law, not even the king. But his previous leaders had both friends and allies. Stannis is all duty and no heart. Above all, he can be manipulated into even allowing devilry into his court. Honor-bound, broken-hearted. So, do you support Stannis Baratheon to the Iron Throne? Or do you support another? Let me know about it in the comments. And thank you again for joining me today. And I'll see you in my next video where we discuss our next candidate. And remember, this is the Icy Breeze, and I bid you adieu.